It's one small step for man.
Welcome to Earth.
One giant leap for mankind.
What's up, man? It's Rick.
UFOs are real.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the I Believe in Humans podcast. I'm your host, Justin. That's my co-host, Dustin. Dustin, how are we doing today, brother?
I am great, man. We have a special guest with us today. I'm really excited. I think we should just dive right into this one, man.
We do. I'm excited.
Really cool
story. We feel graced that he's honoring us with his presence. He was featured in season 2 of Unidentified. He served 12 years in the United States Air Force. And of course, I'm talking about none other than Mr. Jeremy McGowan. So let's bring him in here. Jeremy, how you doing today, brother?
How's it going, guys? I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, man. I appreciate it. I know I've seen we saw such a brief tidbit in Unidentified, but I have heard you kind of making the rounds on some other podcasts. I've seen your story floating around on Twitter. You've been a lot more active. So thank you so much for joining us and returning my phone calls.
Man, I was stoked when you guys reached out to me. It is a pleasure to be here. I love the fact that it is I Believe in Humans. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I've kind of developed mentally in the last several months of dealing with this is the fact that this phenomena requires humanity.
Absolutely.
So
right.
This is an interesting take on things.
It does. And you bring up sort of an interesting point, which is just my first question right off the bat is, I know that just sort of in chatting with you previously that you were, somewhat of a, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhat of a reclusive veteran. You're not living in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
But you were not a UFO guy. I just always like to set the stage of you are not like a UFO guy.
No.
This is just a total random thing that happened to you. But can you just sort of walk us back? Let's start at the beginning. Just sort of who you are and how did you get into the Air Force, and just sort of walk us through your time and your service so we can just get a sense of who you are as a person first.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. There's not a lot of folks that have rewound the clock of time and gone back to the beginning. So this is unique. I grew up in rural West Virginia, in a town of maybe 6,000 people. I'm now living in Las Vegas, which is a slight difference from rural West Virginia there.
So maybe you are in a cabin in a mountain. I spoke too soon, huh?
Well, it wasn't a cabin. It was it's a family farm that has been in my family for, I think this is 2020, so that would make it a little over 140 years that my family has owned this place. It's a 60-acre farm, not in the mountains. We're in the valley.
Yeah.
But I think my high school, we had about 250 people in my graduating class. It was a large high school, but it was the only high school in the entire county. So everybody knew everybody's business. You couldn't do anything, get away with anything, because it's going to come back around, man. Everybody knows where you've been and what you're doing. And I ended up going to college in the same town. A small little private college called West Virginia Wesleyan. And it appeared that roughly by my second year of college that the college decided that college was not for me.
Right.
And
you didn't want to keep funding the good times, I guess. Or was it grades, or it just wasn't it was your cup of tea?
It was the structure of things, man. I enjoyed a lot of my classes. I was a psych major.
Okay.
And I loved psychology, and I was in experimental psychology was my focus. And my professor of experimental psychology was a really unique individual, native from that town. And then I had an abnormal psychology professor who was from Austria and probably taught undergraduate at the same level that most PhD classes would be given in. And while I loved experimental psychology, the abnormal psychology kicked my butt.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the college experience was basically me not liking prerequisites or requirements. I thought that the institution was to open your mind and to teach you things and to expose you to things that you'd not been exposed to before. And I wasn't really prepared to take the liberal arts requirements that would get you the pigskin to hang on the wall.
Sure.
So I ended up going into the military and chose the Air Force primarily because my grandfather was in the United States Army Air Corps prior to 1947, prior to the creation of the Air Force.
Right.
And he was all over the place, and I like the uniforms better.
Well, thank you for his service, and obviously thank you for yours. I should have started with that. Yeah. But he was he's obviously World War II era then, right?
Korea.
Okay. So you joined the Air Force, and you served 12 years, and you're wearing the hat right now, Desert Storm conflict.
Yeah, among others. Desert Storm was the initial one. I joined at the exact right moment in time. I go through basic training. I get out of basic training. I go through what the Air Force calls tech school, and that's where they train you in your specialty. And then from tech school, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which was an Army base up in New Jersey. And that's where I went through ground combat school and became a machine gunner. And then I got assigned to Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina. And just about, I would say, days, maybe a week after I get assigned to Pope Air Force Base, I get deployed and find myself right in the middle of the sandbox in Desert Storm.
Wow.
So it was an indoctrination by literal fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I ended up spending a grand total of 2.5 years in the Middle East. Not all consecutive, but rotated in and out. Probably, I don't think I've ever counted them up, but probably 6 or 7 individual tours in the Middle East.
Wow.
Oh, it's incredible.
Wow.
Everywhere from Saudi Arabia to Taif, to Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, to the UAE, to Al-Qars, maybe Iraq, so and Kuwait and obviously in Jordan.
Right. Wow. So you're in the service for 12 years, and then I know you'll get more into your service time. I know that's part of your story, but where do you go after your 12 years and until sort of you can kind of catch us up before you pop up on our television screens on History Channel?
Man, I tell you what, hats off to veterans who separate and have an easy time of transitioning, because it is not easy to go from being in a pair of combat boots and carrying an automatic weapon to being back in tie tacks and Oxfords. It can be done, and a lot of people do it. I tried it, and I worked in the oil and gas industry for a while, leasing property for large corporation or large oil and gas operations throughout the Appalachian Basin. And I kind of got burned out with it. And a friend of mine had called me up. He lives down in Miami, and he called me up just right at the right time and said, "Hey, I've kind of stumbled onto an opportunity down here in Miami. I want your help down here." So I moved to Miami and worked with him for a while, and we did a lot of operations there in Miami. We were making biodiesel. Taking waste vegetable oil products from restaurants and stuff and converting it into alternative energy. Oh, wow. And we decided that Miami was a great place to be until you wanted to run a business. And the regulatory atmosphere, the competition atmosphere, it was brutal.
Yeah. So
we started scouting locations to do the same thing in other places. And I ended up in Ecuador. And ended up basically selling almost everything I owned except for a 1971 Corvette, which I still have.
Yeah, you can't get rid of that.
No. And moved to Ecuador and I lived in Ecuador for 5 years running this operation. My daughter was born, I got married in Ecuador. My daughter was born in Ecuador. And I had no plans of coming back to the United States until 2 life lessons came crashing by at the exact moment in time. The first one, never rock the boat with alternative energy in an OPEC nation. And the second one is never try to be a capitalist in a socialist country.
Not a match made in heaven.
No, we got nationalized, and I lost everything that I had in a period of about 24 hours.
Wow.
Everything. I left Ecuador with a suitcase. So
it's like a Netflix documentary waiting to happen. I feel
there's a story in there somewhere too. So.
Yeah, you're like on Narcos or something like that. I feel like.
Right. Well, it's funny you say that because I had a friend of mine that was an FSO, foreign service officer with the State Department at the embassy there in Ecuador, and he was a liaison with the DEA, which operates obviously heavily out of South America.
Yeah.
And because I had trucks and vehicles and things like that, there were offers for several alphabet agencies to use our equipment and our trade routes that we had developed.
Right. Wow. So you're not a lazy guy. And all these things that you're doing is you're not, I guess. So I feel like a lot of people think of witnesses and people who have experienced stuff as like you're out there looking for attention, but you're not, right? Like that's why I like to kind of go into your story before the experience, because of you're not sitting in a trailer park like huffing paint, looking at the sky, hoping that you catch your big break. You know what I mean?
No, I've got no meth scars. All my teeth are original.
Still got your teeth. Yeah. And so that just really helps us set the tone. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I appreciate that. And when I got on that show, and I guess we'll get to the how of that, but I think one of the first things that I ever said to Lou Elizondo was, you never want to be the guy that saw a UFO.
I couldn't agree. I have not seen one, so I don't understand. But as I dig deeper into this stuff and talking with people like yourself, I start to see why you would say that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of want to be that guy. I've yet to have that experience, but I'd probably change my tune once I did.
It's weird, man. Hell, I've even been. This is tangentially weird, but I've had a bullet go through my left leg. And being shot, to me, does not feel like everything that I had ever imagined being shot would feel like. The same thing is seeing a UFO is nothing like what I had always imagined seeing a UFO would be like. It's just different.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, getting to that story now, I first heard that story through the show Unidentified season 2. Do you mind telling us? I mean, we could just dive. How'd you get on that show? Meet those producers. What was the entire experience like? Yeah,
so it's interesting. Serendipity is the easiest way of saying how I got on that show. I had a bad day one night. Well, a bad week, I guess it was. I had been recently divorced, and my daughter was with my ex. And I'm sitting at the house just having a pity party for myself, basically. And I think it was, I don't know, some ungodly hour in the morning. I turn on the television, and there is the show, Unidentified. And it's season 1. I think this is episode 2 or episode 3 or whatever. And of course, I had seen Ancient Aliens with the guy with the hair and things like that before.
Giorgio.
Yeah, Giorgio.
It's always
never really
aliens.
paid. Yeah. Oh, it's aliens. Never really paid much attention to it. It was always kind of just background noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I watched this one episode, and it was different. I couldn't really explain how, but it felt different, and it really kind of reminded me of everything that I had seen when I had my experience. And I went on Reddit, and I created what I thought was going to be a burner name on Reddit. and I went initially onto one of the veterans forums because my idea was to find one of the guys that was with me on this deployment, because I've been carrying around in my head for about 24 years this memory. And in 24 years, memories can change. Things can get fuzzy or convoluted or whatever. But to me, this was crystal clear, and I wanted personal validation on what my memory was. And I know Reddit is full of internet detectives, man. You say,
Absolutely.
I saw a redheaded guy with a handlebar mustache at 7-Eleven yesterday, and he dropped his wallet. The next thing you know, Reddit's going to tell you exactly where this guy lives. So
Gotta love the internet.
So
it's
true.
amazing. It's amazing. So I go on Reddit and I post my story in vague details, hoping that the internet detectives there can track this guy down that was with me on this deployment. And they didn't. They did not. But they pointed me, because I'd given enough details to let them know that, hey, I had this sighting and this was this and that was that. They pointed me back to the show that I had just seen. And they were like, if you pause the show at the very end, they have an email address that is asking for military witnesses. I'm like, okay. So I had basically copied and pasted the thing that I had written to Reddit, tossed it in an email, and sent it to that address that they had on the show. Nothing happened. Nothing. It was weeks, maybe 6 or 8 weeks goes by, and the next thing I know, I get a phone call from a Jessica Phillips, who was a producer with A&E, and she was like, "Hey, Mr. McGowan, we got your story. We were wondering if you'd be willing to tell us some more about it." And I was like, yeah, do you think you can help me find the guy that was on this deployment with me? Because now I've got A&E and I've got their producers and their researchers and everybody there. And I'm still not considering going on the show. Right. I'm going to tell them my story, and I want them to help track down the people that were with me on this deployment. Because my goal was and still is to validate my memory of what I had seen. And one thing led to another, and they were not ancient aliens. They were not, no offense to George Norrie, but they were not coast to coast. I wasn't being turned into a toy.
I was going to say parade float.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They wanted to listen to me.
Right.
And they asked the right questions that got me to continually give more information to them. And the next thing I know, I'm on the phone with Anthony Lapp, who is one of the I guess he was the producer for the show. And right after that, I get plane tickets to fly out to New York, and then I'm sitting in a chair in front of Lou Elizondo. So I was like, and I still don't know who the hell was on the deployment with me. But
surreal, yeah.
Really?
I was going to say, I remember the episode never resolved that, and I know you're still looking. So maybe the more these interviews get out and circulate, we'll find that person. So, I mean, without further ado, I mean, obviously, I know how those shows work, where you probably sat down and get interviewed for about an hour, but because of time and you're in an episode with other stories, I really think we only get like maybe 60 seconds of.
It was about, I think if you take the narration that they gave me and some of the comments, my airtime came out to be about 5 minutes.
Okay.
But it was about 2 hours worth of interview.
Yeah, still not a huge, it's like dramatically reduced. And so, and plus, I mean, let's be honest, it's national television. There's probably some things that, their lawyers or whatever, just, don't want to ruffle any feathers versus what we can do on a podcast in terms of, telling the story. And again, just so people know, like, Jeremy's going to tell us his story, and he can talk about some things and he can not talk about other things. And we've already established that he's given us the right to ask him questions, but we're going to take it up to the edge. Right. And so without further ado, we're just going to give you the stage, man. And we want to hear your story. And then, like I said, at the end, We'll start to just dig into some of these things, but let's let people hear your story, because it is one of the most compelling stories that I've come across in my research. It's multifaceted, and I love the way you tell it. You're very eloquent in how you recall these things. So walk us through your story from sort of, beginning to ending, as much detail as you can recall. And like I said, we'll sort of start to get into a deeper dive when you're finished.
Yeah. And for your listeners, I want you all and your listeners to know something is scrambled in my brain. Out of 12 years of being in the military, if I sat down and tried to put pen to paper and detail those 12 years, I can probably recall maybe 11 days out of that entire 12-year time frame. There are, for the vast majority of those 12 years, it's just gone. I can't remember places. I can't remember names, faces, or anything. It's just erased. Then there are days where I could tell you what the scent of the air was like. I could tell you where the drips of sweat were as it ran down my back. I could tell you the position of trees and foliage that was around me. And then it goes blank again, and it's just gone.
Right.
And what your listeners need to understand is, when I tell the story about what happened in Jordan, there are gaps. There are big gaps, but there are things that stick with me that are intensely burned into my brain, where I can recall shades of colors on uniform patches, and there's one guy that I can recall that was sitting in a mess hall that I know for a fact that he had a little string that was coming down off of the Velcro that was on his left shoulder. And I don't know why I can remember fuzz, but I can't remember where I was. It's weird. It's just absolutely weird. And, I've done the whole VA thing. I've talked to the shrinks at the VA and things like that. And they say it's related to PTSD. And I'm like, man, dude, I was in the Air Force. I didn't do anything. I wasn't, I wasn't a forward operator. I wasn't a special forces Green Beret. I don't have PTSD. And he's like, yeah, you do. I was like, I don't do anything. He was like, well, not that you remember. Okay. Right. Fair point. So
have you ever tried hypnotherapy to try and recall anything?
No, I never have. And I'll give a shout out to Sean Cahill at this point, because I have always been a very anti-humanistic person. I never much liked people.
Don't blame you.
I by and large, for the most part, up until very recently, just walked through the front door of my house and closed the door and said, "The hell with the rest of the world. You guys do what you want.
Right.
You're screwed up, and I'm normal." But and that goes in with all the metaphysics and the inward thinking and the self-reflection, and I always thought it was a giant pile of horse crap. And then I meet Sean Cahill, and after probably close to, God, we're probably going on 150 hours worth of one-on-one conversations with each other.
Right.
And he has been able to get inside my brain and flip a switch that has needed to be flipped years ago. And I'm starting to accept that humanity is not a giant asshole.
Like the DMV. The DMV will always be a giant.
Right. Well, I appreciate you saying all that too, Jeremy, because I feel like you're being incredibly honest. And I think the reason why, that's not a disclaimer, right? We're not giving a disclaimer like, what you do recall quite a bit of what happened, but I do appreciate you being honest in terms of like, you see like people try to rip Bob Lazar apart, right? And he's been telling the same story for 30 years and people hang on every word. And it's like last time he told the story, he used a different word, right? He said left when this time he's saying right. And it's like, I think it's important to remember the name of our show is I Believe in Humans. I don't think all humans are assholes, but that's just me. But the point is that you are a human. you have had shit happen to you, which is part of your story, whether it be lost time because of PTSD or concussions from your exciting times in the desert. So why don't we sort of get into some of these details in terms of your service and stuff like that, and then we'll try to unpack some of these things, because I know people are probably hopefully hanging on the edge of their seats at this point. So let's go through what happened to you. And then, like I said, I do want to sort of poke and prod you a little bit, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just don't put gloves on when you're doing the poking and the prodding.
No promises.
So I guess the story begins with the fact that at this point in time, I will have been in the service for a couple of years. And in that time frame, obviously Desert Storm had happened. I had been deployed over to the Middle East already. I had been assigned to a unit at Pope Air Force Base, which at the time was the most deployed Air Force unit in the Air Force. I was attached to JSOC, which is Joint Special Operations Command, which makes up Green Berets, Delta Force, SEAL teams, all sorts of other really intense type of operational guys. I am not one of them. I do support. I am security. I carry large weapons, grenades, big guns, and I protect their stuff when we go out into a forward operating location and they have support equipment that needs to be protected while they go off and do whatever they do. So I work with them. I know them. We've trained together, but I don't do what they do. So I am not some sort of tier 1 special operations guy that I wore a beret, but whatever. So the reason I'm saying this is because at this point in time, I know what military operations feel like. I know what exercises feel like, and I know what actual situations feel like. And I'm at Pope Air Force Base, and we get a call to deploy out. And like I said, my team was always we always had a mobility bag that was packed and ready to go. It was just the nature of, this is the early to mid 90s. The Soviet Union had just collapsed and people are still on edge, man. The world is fractured and just holding on by a thread. So we go places that I didn't even know existed. And we always had to have a bag ready to just answer the phone and go. And that's exactly what happened. And this time it felt different right off the get-go. And 10 of us, me included, myself and 9 others, I should say, we got the message to get our bags and get to the tarmac and get on the aircraft. And we had no idea where we were going. We weren't told anything. We get on a 141 and we fly to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. And from there, we change over to another aircraft. And I believe it was a C-5 at that time. And the C-5 it was the largest aircraft that we have, and a ton of equipment in the bottom and the cargo seats in the top. And I'm just looking around, and the people that kind of got on the aircraft with us in Delaware are not normal. They're not the type of people that you would normally see on a military deployment. And I still don't know where I'm going. And it wasn't until we got about 3/4 of the way over the Atlantic before we were told where we were headed. And they said, you're being deployed to Jordan. I was like, Jordan? By this time I'd already been to Saudi Arabia. I'd spent a lot of time in Kuwait, Taif, Al-Khars, the UAE. I'd been all over the Middle East. Never Jordan. Never even heard of Jordan, really. Nothing ever happens there. So we got to Jordan, and we land. And like I said, there was this feeling, man, that it was different. Normally, when you go onto a military exercise, a joint forces exercise where you've got folks from the Navy or the Army and the Air Force playing together, there's safety inspectors walking around wearing white hats. You've got blank adapters in your gun. You're wearing the military version of laser tag, which is called Miles gear. And you have very, very specific tasks and duties that you have to do during the exercise. This didn't have any of that. I was in full combat load. I was a 203 gunner at the time, which is basically an M16 with a grenade launcher on it. And I've got a vest that's got 18 rounds of grenades, high explosive, deep penetrating grenades, plus 240 rounds of 5.56 ammunition. And you wouldn't have that on an exercise because we're not going to shoot each other on an exercise. And our team gets separated, which is also not normal.
Right.
Because, these are the guys that you train with. These are the guys that their first and last names. And, they're going to start snoring at, 17 minutes after they fall asleep and things like, everything about them because these are the guys that you work with on a daily basis. But we got pulled apart and I have no idea where the other 9 people went. I don't know what their responsibilities were, or anything. And I started looking around and paying a lot more attention to the area and the people around me. And I started noticing people from the 75th Ranger Battalion. I started noticing people from Naval Special Warfare. I started noticing people from the Department of Energy, the CIA, the FBI, alphabet agencies that I didn't even understand yet. I mean, Air Force AFSO, Air Force Office of Special Investigations was walking around. I mean, the FBI was there wearing their blue jackets with yellow letters. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I walk into the chow hall. And I take my weapon off my shoulder and I set it in the gun rack to the side of the door. And this is where I saw the guy that, the uniform with the thread on it. I'm just looking at him. I'm like, that is a majestic beard. How the hell are you in uniform with that majestic? I mean, yeah,
right,
it was right.
I can dream.
But these were just not normal military folks. These were folks that you look at and you're like, this guy has seen some shit. He's done some stuff. He's been some places. And then it wasn't until recently that I started looking at the backstories on these units, and every single one of these units that I had seen or agencies that I had seen there have very, very specific tasks when it comes to nuclear type material.
This is in Jordan, by the way, right? You're in the Chow Hall. You've landed in Jordan at this point.
Yes.
I just want to make sure we clarify that. Okay.
Yeah, definitively in Jordan. And this is where my brain gets a little sketchy because I remember being in civilian clothes. I remember being in downtown Amman, Jordan, with a fanny pack and a concealed 9mm. I remember driving to the Dead Sea and floating in the Dead Sea. And I remember going to Petra, which if you know what Petra is, it's where Raiders of the Lost Ark was filmed. It's that giant temple that's carved into the rock. And I remember going through the crack in the wall where it opens up and the temple comes out. That wasn't Hollywood. That's real. The Hollywood part of that is once you go inside the temple, it only goes back about 20 feet and then it stops.
Yeah.
I don't remember how I got there. I don't remember why I was in civilian clothes. I don't remember who I was with, but I remember, walking across roads that had been built by the Romans in Jordan and seeing remnants of aqueducts that had been built and even standing inside of an older Colosseum type of thing.
Wow.
And then the next thing I know, I'm back on the base and doing this other stuff. And I don't know what causes this or what the separation was between these two memories, but it's unique. So my job was assigned to me, and I was basically told that I was going to work night shift, which was good because it gets really hot in the desert during the day, and I would rather not sweat.
Right.
I don't like that. And night shift is good because people don't mess with you, and the type of people that were on this deployment are the type of people that would severely mess with you. So being out at night was the betterment for me. And I was taken to this location, and I cannot remember if it's on base or off base. And I do not know how I got there. But I was given my orders to guard this crate. And it's just this giant wooden crate. And by giant, I mean, it's not something that you're going to pick up and carry. It is the size of a car. You could park a Volkswagen Bug inside this crate and seal it up, and you'd never know there was a car inside of it. And it was huge. And there was no markings on it. There was no labels or decals or anything. It was just a fabricated wooden crate out there in the middle of the desert. And I was told, don't let anybody near it and don't get near it. And I'm like, okay, where's my SOPs? Where's my rules of engagement? And they're like, we don't have that here. I was like, okay, so just don't let anybody near the crate. Yeah, don't let anybody near the crate. Okay. What happens if they get near the crate? Don't let anybody near the crate. Mm. Okay, I got that part. What happens if somebody gets near the crate? Shoot them. Okay. Okay. Well, this is not an exercise.
Pretty clear.
Yeah, really, really clear at that point in time. So I'm there for, I can't remember how many days. Always working nights. And there's no supervision. There's a little tent a few meters away from the crate, but I don't see anybody really going in or out of the tent. And I'm just walking around the desert, guarding this crate in the middle of the desert, not letting anybody near it. And of course, I'm 24, 25 years old. And back at that time, I was a chain smoker. And when you're working 12 to 16 hours a day, standing up and walking around the desert, you want to smoke a lot of cigarettes. And you can't do it on duty, because even the little cherry at the end of a cigarette from night vision goggles, you can see that from a couple miles away, and it's going to give your position away. And I don't particularly want to get shot, nor do I want to get yelled at.
Yeah.
I'm a low rank at this time. I think I'm an E3, Airman First Class at this point in time, and fairly terrified of anybody who's a colonel or above. And so I just decide that I'm going to have a cigarette, and I found a pretty cool little place that I could walk away from my post, yet still see my post. It was a little sand dune. And I started making that as a habit. And I would crawl up on the sand dune. I could still look down, and I could see my area of responsibility. And there's nobody getting around it, because there is nobody around in the middle of the desert. And man, it is crystal clear nighttime. I mean, beautiful, beautiful nights out there, because there's no humidity, so there's no clouds. And when you lay down and you look up at the sky, you can see the heavens unfold in front of you, man. It's brilliant. And this is where the other guy comes into play that I was searching for on Reddit. And like I said, my team had got split up. So whoever this was that was working with me, I have no idea what his name was. I don't know what base he was from. All I know is that he was another Air Force security officer like myself, but I don't know from where. I don't even remember his rank. But I was happy that he smoked also. And we would both walk over to the sand dune. And I don't know if this was the first night or the second night or the third night that I was out there. I can't remember. But I was just laying down on my back, and I was looking straight up at the stars, and I was thinking to myself, man, I wonder what this would look like in night vision. Holy crap, I've got night vision. So reach down and pull out the nods and put them on. and just lay there on my back, and I'm looking up, and with the night vision, I don't know if you've ever looked through it, but holy crap. If you're looking at the star field with night vision goggles, you think an unfettered view of the sky with your naked eye is brilliant. You put the night vision goggles on, man, and you can see, I'd say probably 1,000 times more stars than what you can see with your naked eye. You can see everything. I mean, the depth of the population of stars that you can see with these things is incredible. Now, the area that we're in, you got to keep in mind that we are literally in the middle of the desert. There is no population base. There's nobody around us. I don't even think Bedouins go through that area. And there's no aircraft in the sky. You can see satellites with the night vision goggles, and you can see them go in very straight or very elliptical type of patterns, and they're fast. I mean, they're really fast. But it's a satellite. You know, it's probably the Hubble Space Telescope, or that's probably a weather satellite or whatever it is, right?
Right.
But like I said, there's no aircraft, nothing. And I'm just laying there on my back, staring up at the sky. And then I see something that it was like, it didn't quite register on me the first time. Mm-hmm. When you're looking through night vision goggles, you have a very limited field of view. I think it's about 40 degrees. So whereas we're looking at 180 degrees or a little bit past that with our eyes, mm-hmm. This narrows it down like you're looking through a paper towel tube.
Gotcha. Okay.
But if you look through a paper towel tube and you're looking at the stars, that's still a really big area that you're able to see. So like I said, I'm on my back and I see a pinpoint of light. It comes from directly behind me, goes straight to the 12 o'clock position, and then it makes a 90-degree turn and shoots off to my left. And it goes from my visual horizon to a visual horizon with a 90-degree turn in the middle. And we're talking under 2 seconds. Satellites do not do that.
Mm-mm. Right.
Airplanes do not do that. And this is just something that I'm like, I mean, I saw it, but it didn't quite register on me. So I'm just, I take another drag of the cigarette and I'm continuing to lay there. And then it starts repeating itself. And I'm seeing this thing shoot from my 6 o'clock, top dead center, 90-degree turn, shoots off, goes off to my 9 o'clock, over and over again. And that's when I take the night vision goggles off. And this is why I want to find this guy. Mm-hmm. I take the night vision goggles off and I give it to the guy that's beside me. And he's like, what? I'm like, just look. He's like, what am I looking for? I'm like, just look. Okay. So he just holds them up to his head. He doesn't strap them on or anything. He's just holding them up there. And about a minute or so goes by and he's just kind of moving his head around. And the next thing you know, I see his head drop down and turn to the left, just like that. And I'm like, yep, you saw it. He takes the goggles back, hands them back to me. He stands up, reaches into his pocket, lights another cigarette, walks off.
Wow.
Never said a word. We did not talk about it. We did not discuss it back on post. There was no more mention of it.
Right.
But I know he saw what I saw, which is why I want to track him down, because I want to hear from his mouth that my memory of this event is his memory of the event.
Yeah, you want to be corroborated.
Exactly. And that was what I saw. And I have no idea. To this day, I have no idea what it was.
Right.
Now, ever since then, I didn't chase it. I didn't try to research it. I think over the course of my life, I've probably read maybe 2 books about UFOs. One of which was written in the 1960s by Eric von Daniken called Chariots of the Gods. Mm-hmm.
Ancient aliens, baby.
Yeah, exactly. But I never went down the rabbit hole.
Right.
I saw what I saw and I moved on.
It was just truly unidentified, not UFO, flying saucer. Like in your mind, you might have had your, inclination, but
I always thought
it's just
that,
unidentified.
yeah, it's not possible for what I know about physics or aircraft for it to do what I saw it do.
Right.
I was not beamed up. I didn't have some sort of psychic episode. People call this an experience. I call it a sighting.
Yeah.
I didn't experience anything. I wasn't fundamentally changed in my belief structure. I didn't have a crisis of faith. I didn't change who I was or how I go about my daily existence. I saw something I could not explain.
Right.
And I saw something that to this day, I still do not know what it is. And it wasn't until that crappy night that I was just having a pity party for myself and got on Reddit. I hadn't really, I thought about it maybe once every other year or so, just as a random intrusive thought.
Sure.
But it didn't, I wasn't obsessing about it.
Right. Now, you mentioned that it repeated itself, which is interesting because if anybody knows anything about science, right, the whole scientific method is you try to repeat things. So this is something that is, like you said, it's not anything that's in sort of happens in right angles and is repeating. Generally, if it's observable, it's generally not considered, random or chaotic. If it's something that's happening ordered, usually that implies artificial or, in our small realm of thinking, man-made.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm not saying little alien green men are behind the wheel. I'm just saying right angles and repeatable is something it's artificial in nature.
Yeah. And to that point, I actually thought for a moment that there was something wrong with my night vision goggles. I thought there was sand in my imaging tube. I thought that there was maybe a busted circuit somewhere. And I take the lens off. I take the imaging tube out. I blow dirt or try to blow dirt out of it and reassemble it and put it back together. And I'm still seeing this same exact thing happening over and over again. Birds don't do that. Aircraft do not do that. Satellites do not do that. And it was not until I was actually being interviewed by Lou Elizondo, and he asked me a question that made the hair on my arm stand up. He asked me if I thought it was one craft repeating a similar flight pattern over and over again, or if it was multiple crafts following the same flight pattern.
Right.
And until he had asked me that, I had never even considered that it could have been more than one.
Right. Which is fascinating because if it's repeatable, it's like, what would possibly be able to sort of, I guess I would imagine if it was flying in a square, like come back and retrace, and what would be able to retrace that accurately. But if it's multiple, it's following sort of a lead. Now, when you say it makes a right angle turn, you're not talking about banking, right? Like if it was a fighter jet, even as laymen, we know that they sort of, when planes turn, they sort of bank, and there's even like a curvature to their turning, right?
If you're an aircraft and you're making a turn, if I'm coming at a heading of, let's say, just 300 degrees, and I want to make a turn, there's going to be a curve to that turn, just because the laws of physics and the conservation of momentum and I'm not a physicist. Hell, I'm not a scientist. I barely got out of high school, but you cannot make a 90-degree turn in a conventional aircraft.
Right.
You can't do it. If you rely on the forces of lift and drag to keep you from falling onto the earth, you cannot make a 90-degree turn. Even if it was a drone, you cannot do a 90-degree turn with a drone aircraft. There is always a curvature. There's always an apex. And this was as if somebody had a square up there.
Right.
And it was a perfectly executed 90-degree change of direction with no observable change in speed or momentum or anything. It was not like it pauses and then it changes direction. It didn't slow down prior to the turn. It didn't speed up after the turn. It was as if it was maintaining the same velocity and same everything as if it was going straight, but it just decided to go left.
Now, could you get a sense of altitude? How high up?
You know, Lou asked me the same questions, and this is my assumption because I have nothing else to base it on. Like I said, there was no aircraft in the area.
Right.
So it was very, very difficult for me to try to place altitude. I mean, was this something that was the size of a grain of sand 6 inches from my face, or was it something the size of a 747 60,000 feet up?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I can only assume, based on the visual field of the night vision goggles and the amount of time it took to go from point A to point B, that we were probably looking around the 80,000 foot range,
which is like low Earth orbit space, basically.
This is U2 altitude. This is SR-71 U2 altitude. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, my other questions are, I don't know a whole ton about night vision, but you mentioned that the cherry on a cigarette would light it up like a flare and give away your position. So was this thing emitting, is night vision picking it up because it's hot? It's emitting something in the sky, or is it the same sort of, it's not as vibrant as like the sky? Like other than its motion, was there something else that made it catch your eye? Again, I know that you can't really tell the size. I understand that, but in terms of like how night vision works, what is it locking on to? Is it heat?
No. Night vision is simply the amplification of ambient light. So the way that these night vision goggles work is there is an image tube or a collector tube that basically collects all the light from all the different sources and then amplifies it so our eyes can see it. It's like if you take a camera and you open the shutter on the camera for a very, very long amount of time, and the sensor is just pulling in all that light constantly. So imagine night vision goggles using a similar process where it's collecting the light and bringing it into the sensor, but then it's projecting everything on a phosphorus tube on the inside. So you basically have like a little miniature television on the inside, and it makes everything green and white and shades of gray.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not colorized. So this does not pick up heat. It picks up light, and it only picks up light. Now it will pick up infrared, but it has to be light.
But you can't see this with the naked eye. So when you hand the goggles to the other guy, you're still looking up, or you're watching him to see his reaction.
This is something that irritates me because I was watching him, and I don't know if I could see it with the naked eye or not.
Right.
And even if I tried, when you take the night vision goggles off, you're night blind.
Yeah, it's like
because there's so much light going into your face that when you take these things off, you can't see anything for 10, 15 minutes until your eyes adjust again. So even if I tried to look up, I probably wouldn't have seen it.
Right. And you're already in sort of a weird situation. So this is just like a blip on your radar, like you said. But I guess the reason why I was asking about the heat signature is if you're, again, we talked about banking and stuff, but no contrails or sense of propulsion. It's not throwing anything out the back that is registering.
If this was an F7 or F-17, if this was an F-16 or any of our fighters at the time in the 90s, and if it had been moving at that speed, if it could even move at that speed, it would have required afterburners, and I would have been able to see afterburners with night vision goggles because that's a giant flame.
And you'd probably hear it breaking the sound barrier or something like that, right?
I don't want to speculate on that because I don't know the distance, the altitude that it was. So I don't know if it was a 747 at the same altitude. I do not know if I would have been able to hear it or not.
Gotcha. Now, the last thing I want to sort of hang on here before we move forward is if it was several vehicles. It wasn't just one repeating.
Hmm.
From a sort of military aspect, is there some sort of if it's moving in a right angle, that almost sounds like a grid pattern. Is there some sort of like operating function for that layman would be able to understand where this is like surveillance, or what would be, you know what I mean? Is there some sort of like tactical advantage to having multiple objects flying in the same direction? Is there something to this in terms of military?
I don't know. I'm not a pilot.
Right.
Let me rephrase that. I am not a military pilot. I have gone through and gotten my student license, and I've flown single engine aircraft and things like that. But I'm not a trained military pilot, so I don't know what their operational procedures are. I cannot think of a reason. If you were searching for something, I cannot think of a reason why you would have multiple aircraft on the same flight path looking at the same thing, where you could spread them out and have multiple eyes over a wider target. So it doesn't make sense to me to have a trailing aircraft following a lead in that kind of pattern.
That's what I was wondering, if there was like a tactical advantage, or this was some sort of, and again, I don't expect you to have these answers. This is just a question that's coming to mind. If it, why would it be following someone's lead? I'm thinking about, I've got friends that were infantry. You kick in a door, you don't stand in a line, because if someone opens fire on you, they're gonna take out your whole squad in one. You want to spread out and put distance. So,
yeah, I don't know, and a lot of people, assuming this was a UAP, a lot of people will ask, well, why didn't it do this, or why didn't it do that, or why was it doing this? Man, I don't know. It's a UAP.
I was going to say, what kind of stupid ass questions are those? You're a 24-year-old smoking a cigarette in the desert. What the hell do I know?
I mean, if this is a craft from another world that is controlled by an alien intelligence or an artificial intelligence, dude, I'm an idiot that joined the Air Force because I couldn't stay in college. How the hell am I supposed to prescribe a behavior pattern to something like that? I don't know.
Right. So let's move on to the plot thickens with the story. So it's not just that you saw something in the sky. That is obviously, a very intriguing part of this, but what's up with the crate?
The crate was an enigma to me for a very, very long time. Again, I was, 24, 25 years old, somewhere around there. This is 1995. And at the time, man, I pissed red, white, and blue. I didn't question anything. Flag was there, I would salute it. Reveille would play, I'd be up and polishing my boots. I don't do that anymore. The crate was weird because of the nature of what they told me. Don't let anybody near it. Shoot them if they do. It was also weird with the people that were on that deployment. Like I said, 75th Ranger Battalion, Naval Special Warfare, Department of Energy, FBI, CIA, Air Force Special Investigations, all these units that were there. And I started thinking about it while I was there, and I started assuming that, okay, the crate probably has some sort of nuclear material in it that we would use to focus our satellites, so that when our satellites are passing over, Iran or North Korea or somewhere that's an enemy state, we can kind of calibrate our satellites.
Yeah, it's giving off some sort of signature or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what made sense to me at the time. And that's the thought that I went with for a number of years. And the more I started digging into this after I went on Reddit, I actually tracked an individual down, and they were interviewed by the History Channel. It did not make television. but the producers went out to California and sat down with this guy, and he was basically on the same operation a few weeks or months later than I was, and he was on the receiving end of that crate.
Oh, wow.
And he confirmed for me what my evolved suspicions were about the crate.
Right.
And through my research, I had dug up testimony by John Deutsch, who was the director of Central Intelligence back at the time, and he had given congressional testimony in 1996. And in front of Congress and on congressional record, John Deutsch is talking in 1996 about an incident that occurred in Jordan in 1995. So I'm in Jordan in 1995, and John Deutsch is telling Congress about how we intercepted Russian guidance systems from pilfered nuclear missiles that were heading towards Iran. It is my belief that guidance systems do not require a crate the size of a Volkswagen Bug. But
and the Department of Energy to be on scene. Yeah.
Yes. Without going into details about who I talked to or how I got the information,
Sure.
it is my personal opinion, and corroborated by the witness that the History Channel interviewed in California, that the contents of that crate was actually a recovered nuclear warhead from the Soviet Union. And by nuclear warhead, I don't mean just one. I mean, it was the nose cone of what I believe to be an SS-24, which has the capability of holding 10 nuclear warheads.
Oh, wow.
Scary stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I believe was in the crate. And I believe that during the vetting process that I went through with Anthony Lapp and Lou Elizondo, which was very, very rigorous, I believe that they came to the same conclusion, and that is why I made the cut where 1,000 other witness testimonies did not, is because my story alludes to the fact that this phenomenon, it has the ability to track singular devices on places on this planet where those devices shouldn't be.
It's and that's an interesting statement, because it's been said many times on many different shows in many different ways that there's clearly a correlation to the nuclear age and UFO activity from the first, detonation out in White Sands, right, and on the proving grounds. These things start showing up as soon as we start detonating these things all over the world. So that is my most interesting question to you, again, is your thoughts on this. Is you have some distance on this, and you've done a lot of research and stuff. Do you think that is it of your opinion that the encounter, the sighting is correlated to the crate? Or had the crate not been there and you're just on average Joe guard duty, whatever, you are guarding a Volkswagen in the desert, would that sighting have occurred? Do you think is it coincidental, or do you get the impression that they're tied together?
This would be simple conjecture on my part, because I cannot ascribe, again, a behavior pattern to something that I don't even know what the hell it is.
Right.
But given the circumstances of where I was, when I was, what I was doing, and my beliefs of what was in the crate, I think that there is a very strong correlation between the appearance of this UAP and the content of the crate. I don't think that it chose me to reveal itself to. I don't think that I was anything other than a accidental viewer.
Right. A bystander.
A bystander that happened to have night vision technology that looked up at the right moment at the right time to see it seeing the crate.
Mm-hmm. And you are guarding the crate from anyone getting close to it. How close did you get to it?
Oh man, I was all over this thing. They say don't get near it, right?
Yeah.
That was don't get near it. Don't let anybody else get near it, man. I sat on it. I stood on it. I laid down on it. I pissed on it. Man, I was
America.
I'd be doing the same thing.
absolutely. I was all over that crate.
Oh.
Um,
If it was nuclear, did you notice like any type of burns or sickness feeling or any like dizziness or anything weird?
not until about 9 years ago.
Oh wow.
9 years ago, I was diagnosed with a very specific type of skin cancer that is only caused by exposure to radiation.
Oh wow.
I've had it surgically removed, and it has not come back.
Good.
But it was on my inner thigh, and I do not sunbathe in the nude. So there's no reason for my inner thigh to have ever been exposed to radiation, except for when I was sitting on or lying on or pissing on this crate.
Wow.
Well, it's a good thing it was only your thigh, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I started, yeah, right. Wow. That would have sucked.
Unless it gave you superpowers.
Or a couple more inches.
It did not do that. I can testify.
I wasn't going to go there. I said we were going to keep it, but I can't contain it.
You're on us. You could have fooled us.
Right. Yeah. No, my wife will probably see this and she'll call me out. The only reason that I bring this up is because, like I was saying, the Soviet Union had collapsed 4 years prior to this. Mm-hmm. And the Soviet Empire had a huge stockpile of nuclear weapons. I mean, all throughout the entire continent. And at the collapse of the Soviet Empire, there was an immediate rise of these nation states that had never self-governed. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden they have access to nuclear weapons. There are silos inside their territory, and there is no command and control over these things anymore. Mm-hmm. So you have former generals of the Soviet military who are now finding themselves inside of a new country that they have no allegiance to.
Right. And
their currency has collapsed. Their family is starving. And all of a sudden somebody comes up to them with, a few thousand rubles and says, hey, open the silo door, Ivan, and look this way while I take this. And they're like, okay, this will feed my family for a week and a half. They don't care. They have no allegiance to that. So this stuff goes missing. I believe in that testimony by John Deutsch, he was referring to about 600 devices had gone unaccounted for from the Soviet arsenal.
Wow.
Right. And I think most of them have been recovered, but there are still a few that are out and about. But if I am going to secret the nose cone of a former Soviet ICBM that holds 8 warheads, if I'm going to put that in a truck and I'm going to drive across portions of the former Soviet Empire in areas that have less than stellar societal actions going on in them at the time, across the Syrian desert, through Jordan, and try to get into areas where I can sell this, I know I have a limited amount of time and I have a limited amount of fuel, and I'm going to do everything that I can to strip as much weight off of this thing as possible. So say goodbye to all that lead shielding.
Yeah.
Right. It's just basically like a pallet wood between you and the nose cone.
Yeah.
Of a Russian nuclear device.
It's going to be the plutonium core.
Yeah.
The explosives that send that core critical.
Right.
The wiring, and maybe some nuts and bolts holding it into a special shape, but that's it.
Now, are you able to share where you think that crate ended up going? Because this is in American custody, but again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems very covert in the sense there's 2 E3 security officers guarding a potentially nuclear device stripped down to bare bones in the middle of the desert. Obviously, they're trying to keep something secret, because it's a lot easier to keep two guys quiet than your full 10-man squadron, I imagine. So do you have any idea of where it went?
I didn't until I talked to the guy who confirmed my suspicions on the content of the crate.
Okay.
He will never identify himself. His requirement when the production crew went out and interviewed him for the Unidentified show was that he had to be black silhouette with voice changing and all sorts of things. And I think it was just too much. They interviewed him. They corroborated my story with him, but he never made the air.
Yeah.
I want to prefix this by saying that what I'm about to say does not come from any government source. I was not given this information. I was not read into any program. This is my assumption, and this is my assumption corroborated by my conversations with him. Okay. So that said, I am not violating any confidentiality agreement. I'm not violating my security clearance or anything like that, because everything was open source and it was not given to me by government channels.
Understood.
When the Soviet Empire fell, there were a lot of emerging nations that had been previously under the sphere of control of the Soviet Empire. They got their military defense infrastructure from Russia or from the Soviets. They got energy. They got financial backing, training, all sorts of things from the Soviet Empire. And this was very problematic for the United States, especially with the Middle East being a very hotbed of regime change and newly discovered oil reserves and all sorts of things that were happening that everybody wanted to gain control over. So the United States was very, very interested in building allies that had been previously beholden to Soviet influence.
Okay.
I fully believe that the crate was taken to the African continent and placed into military readiness in the country of Egypt.
Interesting.
Oh.
Wow.
And I believe that to have been done. And I could be very wrong about this, but I've not been proven wrong about this yet. So I'm going with my gut, and I'm going with what I've been told, that we did this because in the mid 90s, all the way up through roughly the early 2000s, there was basically four countries that would have sensor technology sensitive enough to be able to pinpoint radiation signatures and identify sources. And that would have been Canada, the United States, Israel, and Russia. If we had control of a nuclear device inside of the Middle East that was not our plutonium, we could launch a first strike on anybody inside the Middle East and blame it on Russia because of the isotopic signature.
It's quite genius.
Yeah.
To be honest.
We can't do that now because of the sensor technology and everything that has developed since then. But in that time frame, it makes perfect nefarious sense that we would have staged a captured Soviet nuclear device in a way that would have given us the ability to launch a first strike and blame Russia for it.
This is very Jack Ryan, Tom Clancy. I picture Harrison Ford running around trying to track this thing.
Harrison might be a little old now, I think.
Breaking his ankle, just crashing airplanes.
Let's please just leave Shia LaBeouf out of this one too.
So you're exposed to this nuclear crate. this experience is it's just so compelling on so many different levels. You go on the television show, you've got your Reddit detectives, you're doing all this stuff. Again, I can't tell people enough that you were not a UFO guy like before this. And in talking with you, I think you appeared on another podcast, like 6 months ago or something. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and what you've been finding now that you've had this experience? You're kind of on record, and now you're kind of out there, and UFO people, like you said, Reddit detectives and UFO people, I mean, they're probably reaching out to you, and now you're sort of fully immersed in this community and investigating this stuff. Can you just sort of speak a little bit to what it's like to be, someone who had a sighting and now investigating other sightings? And do you think that helps you in your investigations, your inquiries? And have you been able to find any more answers towards what you think you saw?
So basically, for a very large portion of my adult life, I spent literally pointing the dangerous ends of weapons at dangerous people, trained in how to do it, and sent to places specifically to do that. So my mentality always goes towards a threat scenario. How do I protect my family? How do I protect myself? How do I keep my kids safe? And when I met Lou, he was very much the same person in person as he was on camera, talking about the fact that these unknowns pose a threat. We haven't been attacked by them. They're not shooting lasers at us, but the fact that we cannot control them, the fact that we do not know what they are, is default mindset is to that of a threat. So for me personally, my motivation started to become identifying it so that I know, is this something that I can fight? Is this something that I can protect against? Is it something that I need to protect against? Or is it a benevolent something? And all these questions started coming crashing down on me at one time, and I needed a filter. And I needed to figure out what I was going to do about it, because one person can't do anything about it other than find out what they want to define the truth as. And now that I've had a little bit of a following, trail behind me and beside me, I've gotten access to people and places that I never would have had access before, that is helping me try to understand what this phenomenon is. And I still don't know. I think that there's a lot of theories.
If you did, feel free to break the news right here and now. Right?
Yeah.
Game over. Thanks. Disclosure is now here. Thanks, Jeremy.
I can pretty much tell you what it's not.
Right. So
I'm not even going to say I don't think. I'm going to say it's not us. And let me define us.
Right.
It is not the United States government. It is not the Canadian government. It is not the Sri Lankan government or the Russian government or the Chinese government. It is nobody on a domestic terrestrial basis that has this technology in present day shape and form. It may well be us, as in humanity, and this is a theory that I'm kind of currently chasing, is the fact that there is a high possibility that the phenomenon is a human phenomenon, but it's not our current humanity that is controlling this.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas out there when it comes to not just, again, everyone jumps to the little green men idea, or gray men, because of that's what's been popularized in fiction since the 1950s. But when you really kind of get 2 feet into this stuff, you realize, okay, it could be, one extraterrestrial race. It could be many. It could be transdimensional. It could be time traveling. It could be humans from the future that have somehow conquered the fourth dimension of time and figured out how to come back and warn us about things. Who knows? It's all speculation, right? Until they land, quote unquote, on the White House lawn, and say, "Hey, I'm Zarlak, and I'm here to explain this all to you." All we can do is take sort of, again, your eyewitness testimony, and eyewitness testimony is tough because your brain is not a camcorder. We've established, right? And so all we can do is we can establish credibility that you're not a bullshit artist and you're not interested in peddling bullshit. So we can just take your story and we can take it for what it's worth. And what we do is we try to track down the other guy, like you said, to kind of corroborate. And we try to do these different things to just take us however closer, one step further to the truth, these baby steps, right?
And my approach to this from day one has always been to validate my memory, and then secondary to that, to understand what I need to do for my own personal circle.
Right.
And then the access that I've been given or developed ever since that TV show has been with those two primary goals still in mind, but it has expanded my ability to affect other things.
Well, and I think that's infectious, because if everybody had that mindset, we don't all have to grab hands and kumbaya and like put our purses and shoes in the middle and pray around them to figure out what's going on. Even if someone if not everybody, but a lot of people, there's power in numbers, right? And instead of sitting around waiting for the government, mommy and daddy to like disclose to us what they do or do not know, I think it's important that we go out and we try to really, it's in our hands, right? Like the government ultimately works for us.
In theory.
In theory, on paper, it was supposed to. But the idea is we really need to sort of apply the pressure. I don't think any politician's ever done anything out of the kindness of their heart. It's usually who's lining their pockets, or what journalist found out that dirt, whatever was underneath the rug and is about to explode it, and they're trying to get out in front of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think the more that I look into this, the more people I talk to, the more rungs down the rabbit hole ladder I climb, I am more cognizant about the fact that disclosure will never come from the government. And it's just not going to happen.
Right.
And it's not going to happen in an official capacity. I think that we don't even need to be leveraging the release from the government. We just need to go find it our damn selves and say, hey, here it is.
Yep.
Right, because apparently it has such high capabilities that they can't even keep it a secret themselves. I've used the analogy to the Osama bin Laden raid with SEAL Team 6, that we didn't know that we had stealth helicopters until they accidentally crashed one and blew it up on their way out of there, and we saw like the tailpiece hanging off. And you bet the Chinese and other countries were rushing there to reclaim that and try to reverse engineer it. And it's kind of like the government doesn't owe us anything in terms of the national security state, right? They're not going to just come out here, all of a sudden it was, hey, we killed bin Laden. Now a lot of people, very few people were like, oh, cool, we also have stealth helicopter technology. That seems pretty insane.
Yeah.
And who's to say we're not doing that with shit that crashed in Roswell from 1947?
No, we probably are.
Right.
But I also believe that as far as disclosure is concerned, I don't believe that the government has a mechanism in place to actually cause it to happen.
Right.
I think that and it didn't, but let's just say that everything started in 1947. Since 1947, the Roswell crash and the formation of the United States Air Force, ironically in the same year, ever since then, everything has been fractured, compartmentalized. Hand A doesn't know what hand B is doing. And even if somebody that wears a uniform and polished shoes has all the answers. They don't know who to go to ask permission to release this to.
Right.
Because that mechanism doesn't exist.
Right. I agree. I think I've often sort of pondered with Dustin in terms of the idea that how poisonous secrecy is. I think that Lou often says that, light is the greatest disinfectant, because it's like you tell one lie and then you find yourself telling lies to cover up the other lies that you've told. And you've spun a web so deep that now we don't even know how to. The altruism is gone, right? Even if there are good people on that side, because the government's massive and the military's massive, and they're not all our enemies and they're not all adversarial. But like you said, it's like they just are so read into the lies that even when you joined the military for your 12 years of service, the lies were so ingrained that would have been your truth.
Yep.
And you wouldn't know any better.
No, you don't. And I will say that military training is absolutely brilliant at getting you to do things that you normally would never have done without it. And I'll give you a very quick example. In basic training in tech school, we go through exercises on a daily basis. They put an M16 in your hand with a blank adapter on it, or, give you a broomstick and make you go pow pow with it at bad guys. But one of the reoccurring scenarios that I had, and especially, I guess it was probably because of the time frame in the 90s and the Cold War just finishing and things like that, but it was always nuclear security exercises, always something to do with nuclear security. And at the Lackland Air Force Base, they had a mock-up missile silo with a perimeter fence around it, and they would put us on guard duty, and they would pretend that we were guarding the entrance of this nuclear missile facility, and they would have spectators on the other side of the fence start rattling the fence, and protesters chanting anti-nuclear things at us, and they would take us through the steps daily, identify, challenge, push back, target, neutralize.
Right.
And they would give us scenarios every single time that would include things like somebody getting through the fence and getting towards the red phone on the call box outside the nuclear silo. But the guy that was on the phone would have a small child in his hand. And once he breached that fence, it didn't matter. You were taught shoot through the child to neutralize the threat. And this guy is on a telephone outside of a nuclear facility that is surrounded by feet deep concrete.
Right.
He's not getting to the nuke. He's not going to do it. What's the worst he can do? Spray paint it? Right. He is no threat, but we were taught that he is a threat. And when I first got to Pope Air Force Base, one of the first days that I was there, we had an exercise for security forces, and I was on the flight line. I was with a staff sergeant. I had my M16 with me. Of course, we carry live ammunition because we're on actual duty. But when they throw an exercise in there, they'll get on the radio and they'll say exercise, exercise, exercise. So everybody knows that everything that follows this transmission is dealing with not a real world scenario. It is definitely an exercise. And the situation was we had an aircraft on the flight line that they were calling a priority A resource, which means that it was nuclear capable. And in this exercise, there was a guy holding a sledgehammer running up towards this aircraft. So I jump out of the vehicle that I'm in, and I've got my M16, and I know it's an exercise. I hear it in my radio that it's an exercise, and I'm even saying exercise back, with my call sign. But my training kicked in. I saw the guy running towards the aircraft with a sledgehammer, and the first thing I do is I take my M16 down, and I'm at port arms, and I challenge him, and he doesn't stop. And now I'm like this. I'm pointing an M16 with live ammunition at him, and he's not stopping. I chamber around, and he doesn't stop. I take it off safe, and my finger is on the trigger, and then it hits me. I'm about ready to shoot a guy in a damn training exercise because of the repetitious process of the training that I had gone through. This, in my head at that time, that makes sense.
Wow.
Right. It's such a powerful image in terms of what people in military roles are indoctrinated into, in the sense that, look, at the end of the day, I love the fact that you had the guts to put your pen to paper and sign up to go and do this stuff. So frankly, I don't have to. And that goes for every veteran I meet, because I grew up in California and I had long hair and I smoked weed on the beach. I didn't have to go to Afghanistan and Iraq, but I understand what you guys go through. And I've heard similar stories from friends of mine who were in the infantry in Afghanistan and protecting bases that were just unloading on cars that were aggressively approaching gates on forward operating bases with no regard with women, children. Do they need help? It's just shoot that thing. The call comes over the radio, and he talks about just unloading rounds and seeing pink mist.
Yeah.
And you just try to go to bed the next day. And the reason why I bring this stuff up is because when you're dealing with disclosure and these types of things, I think civilians forget that you guys are human beings, and they expect the world of you, but they don't understand the training that you go through, and that you're, like you said, you pissed red, white, and blue. Like, you've been out of the service for what, 25 years, you said now about, and so you're only able to talk like this now and have this open-mindedness, and it took you 25 years to get to this point.
Yeah.
And so and you're just one story. And so if we're looking at an apparatus that has this sort of culture in it, of course we're not going to get anywhere. We're, even if people do or do not know anything, like you said, it's so compartmentalized and it's so far down, you just stuff that shit down. If you can open around on a guy holding a baby, what the hell do you care about if there's UFOs in the sky?
You don't think. You
exactly.
react. You don't. It's an autonomic response, and you're not. I want to say that you're in control of everything that you do, but you're not.
Right. Well, and it's the point. I mean, honestly, it's that split second can mean life or death in your position. So I understand why they do it, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong, because hey, like I said, I'm not in that position. I don't get shot at for a living, right? So to you guys and law enforcement officers and all that stuff, I get it, man, because that split second could mean your life. Mm-hmm. But it's just sort of like kind of walking it back to the experience, and sort of the total experience is like, now that you do have hindsight, now that you are sort of more involved in the UFO community and stuff, where do you go from here in terms of your investigations? Have you found that are other military people more open to you because you were in the military and because you are public now? Like, do you think because of your position and the stories that you're telling, like you are right now, like the biggest thing I've taken from you is you are no holds bar, unapologetically honest. And, a lot of guys wouldn't be telling the kind of stories you are because maybe they're a little, I don't know what the word would, they're just sort of like ashamed of what they were capable of and maybe still are. But have you found that you've been able to sort of like reduce the stigma? Because again, I feel like all of these witness testimonies is the main goal is to get more Jeremy McGowans out there telling their story. So maybe we have a chance at pulling these layers back.
I would have shot the baby. And
I'm laughing at like you're just directness, and like, because I don't know what else to like do to that, but
I would have. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if you saw something to say something.
Right.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. The government is not necessarily as friendly as we make it out to be. It is not the benevolent protector of Western democracy. It is a machine. And that machine at one point in time controlled, and I'm speaking to the veterans out there, it controlled you. It controlled your thought process. It controlled what you accepted into your circle. You're out. Say it. It doesn't control you anymore.
Right. That's powerful, man. And I mean, I want to get, again, I don't want to keep you here all day, but I appreciate you hanging in there as long. I just want to get a couple quick takes from you in terms of there is this supposed UAP task force that has been designed to try to create a reporting thing for even active duty service members. Because as of right now, we're relying on veterans because you guys are, what's been deemed like a trained observer. Right. And Elizondo has his like observables that how he distinguishes from credible reports and whatnot. And veterans, tend to have this sort of like an honor to them, right? An integrity to their statements. What do you think of these stories that are coming out and like the attempt at creating a platform for active duty, like pilots and people, to communicate these things? Do you think there's any teeth and any traction to something like that? Or from what you see, is this just sort of like a politician sort of appeasing someone who was nagging him a little bit, and they just, I'll just give you something on paper to shut you up for a little bit? Do you think there's a possibility that this is going to work?
There's always a possibility. It's the probability and where it lies on that spectrum of success. I think Chris Mellon said it, about 2 weeks ago? He said that basically UAPTF is two guys in a corner office with no budget.
Right.
I don't know who they are. I know that they are there because they want to change policy within Washington.
Right.
I do not believe that policy can be changed from within, because Washington is its own echo chamber.
Yeah.
I think that citizen science, I think that individual processes and individual goals that folks have to go out there and find the truth from themselves and uncover it and push it out there is what is going to affect policy. I think that people like Lou Elizondo, who are doing everything that they can to affect an openness, change policy in Washington. I think we need more people like him. We need people who can filter through the BS. And I will say straight up that there are some lying assholes out there that pollute this, that put so much noise in it, that it is difficult, if not impossible, to tell what is true and what is just some guy that wants his 15 minutes. Man, I didn't want my 15 minutes. I got my 15 minutes handed to me. And because I have it, I'm going to do something good with it. But it's not where I wanted to be. It's not who I wanted to be when it happened. Right.
Right.
So we need society to go out there and find these things, record these things. My God, get rid of your iPhone 9s and upgrade, people. Hold this shit steady, clean your lens. And when you upload something, get me the EXIF data on that video. Because if I see another video of some weird cloud that is blowing around in the wind without any digital data to back it up, it does nothing.
Right.
It does nothing. Just don't be sensationalist about it.
Do you think that when you were still in the service, if there was some sort of like apparatus where you could have reported your sighting type of a thing, do you think you would have used it, or would you just been like, that's that stupid thing that, like it would have been stupid? You would take it serious?
I'm not the person to ask that question to, because I walked off post to go have a cigarette when I saw what I saw. I am not going to go to the brass and say, hey, when I'm supposed to be guarding that nuke over there, I was about 300 meters over this way smoking a cigarette and I saw this. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can agree with that. I've been there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure since that sighting, you've been keeping your eyes up in the sky a lot more. Have you witnessed anything since then?
Man, God, I hate the fact that you asked me that question.
Oh no.
Yeah, once. And I tell you, you never want to be the guy that saw the UFO.
Yeah.
You never want to be the guy that saw the UFO twice.
Mm-hmm.
I questioned my own memory,
Mhm.
and I still want validation for the thing that I saw 25 years ago in the Jordanian desert. About a week ago, I saw something again
Oh,
for
wow.
about 6 to 8 seconds that creeped me out, and it was, man, it's just weird. And this goes back to something that Sean Cahill and I have had a lot of discussions about, the fact that the phenomenon needs humanity. And I say that because I believe that there is some sort of link between our conscious state. And I don't mean crystal wearing hippie voodoo woohoo stuff. I mean that there seems to be some sort of legitimate link, and call it quantum entanglement if you want to get scientific about it, but between what's going on here in our head and what's going on up there above our head.
Right.
I had a close friend of mine that was a military intelligence officer. He was an all-source intelligence officer for the veterans out there. They know what this means. He had a sighting. He lives very close to the Indian Point nuclear facility in New York. And about 3 weeks ago, he calls me up frantic, and he's telling me what he is seeing as he's seeing it. And I take a very, very detailed report of it, and there's nowhere for us to go with it. You know, I can't give it to anybody. It's not like I can pick up the phone and call UAPTF, because they're
Don't
not
exist.
structured like that, right?
You can tell us on the show right now.
Yeah. So, well, as a matter of fact, you know what? I'll give you the report, because I'm not holding on to it for any reason of classification.
All right, here you go. You heard it first. You heard it here first, right?
Exactly. But he has a sighting, and I take a report, and 48 hours later he calls me again, and I take another report because he has a secondary sighting. And then 48 hours after that secondary sighting, I walk across the street with my daughter because she's skateboarding with the neighbor's kids, and it's just after dusk. Street lights are on, and I'm cold, and I want to go home. So I tell my daughter, Cameron, to come on inside the house, and I turn around and I start walking back to my house. And she's on her skateboard, so as she starts crossing the road, I naturally turn around to watch her cross the road because I don't want to get her hit by a car. As I turn around, above my neighbor's house, I'm guessing the altitude to be no more than 400 feet.
Oh, wow.
I see, yeah, it's close. I see the brightest light in the air that I have ever seen. And if you've ever seen a police helicopter go by, you can see the light from the light go all the way down to make, you know, it's reflecting off the dust particles. There's a legitimate beam that comes from the helicopter down to the ground. Right?
Yeah, it's like makes like a cone shape. Yeah, almost, yeah.
You can see it from the landing gear of aircraft. You can see it from, you know, the police searchlights on the helicopters. This was bright as hell, and there was no beam. It was like the light was there, but it did not affect anything else around it.
It didn't light up the street.
It did not light up the street. It did not reflect off the roof of the house. There was no sound. There was no noise. It was just, it was light. And then it wasn't. And it was just gone. And I go back to this link between what's going on here and what's going on up there. It was almost as if this thing was saying, I know you took a report. I'm watching you watch me.
Is this what the other guy saw too?
Similar.
Did it match? I was gonna say, if you tell me that, like, he's like, I saw this crazy bright light over my neighbor's house, and all of a sudden,
well, he saw a crazy bright light, but he saw a crazy bright light over Indian Point nuclear facility, and he saw it split into a few other bright lights,
Right.
and then coalesce back together and just blink out of existence.
Wow.
When I picked up the phone and I talked to Sean Cahill again, Sean was saying that, you know, the serendipity that is involved in these sightings and the links that's involved in these sightings cannot be discounted, and that he would not be surprised if it was in fact the exact same one that my guy in New York saw.
That gives me chills.
Well, at the very least, and again, I'm going to play the skeptical one here, which is at the very least, whether it's a UFO or not, there is something to be said of that you are now on the record. So whether it's ET listening to you or a government agency listening to you and trying to fuck with you.
I want it to be a drone.
You know what I mean?
Because everybody says that the stigma is going away, and that is bullshit.
Yeah.
The stigma is not going away. There have been people that have made a concerted effort to get rid of the stigma, but it is certainly still there. It may be less among specific folks in military or recently out of the military, but for the vast majority of this 8 billion people on this planet, you don't want to see a UFO because you don't want your neighbors to look at you with that look. And, you know, there are people out there that claim to see UFOs all the time, or they claim to be able to do CE5 and call down orbs and what. I call crap on that all the time. I have to now call crap on myself.
Right.
Because even though it was 25 years between the two events, the probability of a person seeing one is very slim. The probability of a person seeing two is extremely, extremely sketchy.
Yeah, it's like being struck by lightning twice and being attacked by a shark in the ocean, like whatever that probability
at the same
is.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I'm the guy that has seen two, and I want my second one to be a drone because I still want to concentrate on what the hell the first one was.
Yeah.
Well, it could have attached you. That's what I was saying, is if it is a metaphysical, there is something to the consciousness, it could be attached. It could just be simply listening to I Believe in Humans podcast, which what's up, Zarlak? Or it could be the government. Like, you know, there's Rick Doty out there who's been on record, who's been interviewed, that he worked for the Air Force, OSI, and that they staged abductions and they did all sorts of things to like fuck with people and spread disinformation. So that's why I was saying, you know, I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm just saying that we know this shit is out there, and that there's kind of two assumptions, that there are UFOs and there's ET UFOs, extraterrestrial from other planet sort of a thing. But there's also the reproduction aspect of maybe we have reverse engineered some capability, and that is being driven by a man, and they're fucking with Jeremy McGowan because he's out there trying to, you know, beat the bushes a little bit.
Yeah,
It could be. But like I said, the first time that I saw something in the Jordanian desert, it was just happenstance that I happened to walk off post, have a cigarette, lay down, put on night vision goggles, and look up. This time it was just happenstance because I wanted to watch my daughter cross the road on a skateboard.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to go look.
Right.
Yeah. You're swimming in bloody waters now, so the next shark is right around the corner.
Right?
Gotta be careful.
So what is next for you in terms of, I agree wholeheartedly with people updating their iPhones and no more shaky camera phones. And please God, with the people that just CGI shit to get YouTube clicks, nothing's more annoying than that. What are your efforts that you're personally doing to find your truth and to sort of compile scientific analysis and more try to collect more data-driven points? Because you seem to be pretty tech savvy, more so than I am. I know there's something sitting behind you right there that you've been tinkering with. Do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown in terms of what your sort of tools of the trade are now?
My tools of the trade are nothing but a bullshit filter. But I've been lucky enough to find a technological version of that. there is a group out there, a all volunteer group called Skyhub, and you can find them at skyhub.org. They have registered to become a nonprofit. I don't believe the registration has actually gone through yet, but they are founded by a guy by the name of Steve McDaniel, who is joined by Chris Cogswell and some other guys that are extremely astute in machine learning, artificial intelligence, coding, and they have created what I call the most ambitious global open source citizen science project that has ever existed. And it's called Skyhub. And what it is a multi-layered sensor platform that you can build from commercial off-the-shelf parts from Amazon or basically any electronic store that utilizes their open source software that will utilize cameras and ADS-B flight navigation systems and things like that to scan the skies and use machine learning and artificial intelligence to identify, categorize, and make unknown objects known that are in our airspace. And it's a very, very unique project that I immediately fell in love with, because I can't go out and I can't catch a ride on Blue Origin or SpaceX to see what is flying around above Earth. I'm never going to get into the ISS.
It's only $250,000 a ticket, I've been told.
Yeah, like I said, I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to be given access to special access programs. I'm never going to have the government come to me and say, this is the document you've been looking for.
Right.
Disclosure is never going to come to me, but I can sure as hell try to go to it. And if I have access to sensor technology that can identify the difference between a moth that is reflecting IR from a crappy camera or a 747 at 40,000 feet, or a 40 centimeter size Maverick 2 drone that somebody's flying around with a flashlight taped to it. And if this AI can tell me what those are and that they're not the phenomena, then I have reduced the noise and I have eliminated a lot of false positives that can help us get to the truth a lot faster. Because not only will it tell me if it has identified something, it will also tell me that it can't identify something, and that the way something is or where it is or when it is or the flight pattern of it does not match any currently known entity. Right. And that's when we record the data, we match the data visually with all sorts of telemetry, whether it be weather and GPS and time and date stamping and known position of aircraft with transponder data. And then that information is pushed to the cloud, and it is given to the public on free access for scientists and academia to be able to study and come to their own conclusions on what this is. And this could well be, if we get 2,000 or 3,000 of these things around the planet, this could be what forces the government into disclosure. Or it could be what we use to give the government disclosure.
I like that.
So the way that the Skyhub was developed and designed, it was developed to be a static box that requires constant power and constant internet access. And it's just a silent sentinel that you set out in your backyard or on top of your house, or you hook it up to a generator when you go camping and you just let it run. And it does what it does. And if it sees something, it sends you an alert. I took it a step further, and I am integrating it into my vehicle. I am turning my personal vehicle into basically a UAP tracker. And I don't know if I have enough cabling here, but if you can see this,
Yeah.
this is the bare bones of the SkyHub system without the enclosure. And
for the people listening, he's holding it up right now. It's about the size of what, like a TV tray or something like that?
Yeah, it's about 12 by 14, I'd say. 12 inches by 14.
So it's not massive. That's what I want people to sort of, it's very much.
I've got probably maybe $1,000 in this altogether.
Yeah.
But I have a 22-year-old Land Rover Discovery 2 that is a very capable off-road vehicle. And I am ripping out the one of the jump seats in the back, and this is going to be installed in it. The cameras are going to be permanently mounted on the roof of the vehicle, along with the ADS-B sensors and the GPS and the motion sensors. Eventually, we're going to have passive radar. We're going to have 2 extra cameras that are going to be able to track with a PTZ and triangulate and be able to give you exact position and altitude of tracked items or tracked objects. And I'm going to be able to drive this.
Oh yeah. No more blurry cameras.
I guess I'm going to have to rip the car seats out of my wife's 4Runner and make some room for a SkyHub, baby.
There you go. And this is accessible to anybody, man. I mean, it doesn't have to be $1,000. I think one of the lowest cost versions is maybe about $300 if you want to buy the entry level pieces parts. I built mine for expansion so it can use other sensors as they become tested and developed and approved for use. And because I'm integrating this into my car, it's going to become a permanent feature. Hopefully it's not going to look like Ghostbusters machine as it goes down the road. But,
I think that looks cool.
You never know.
Hell yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate you elaborating on that stuff for us, man. And thank you so much for coming on. This has been
thank you.
Super enlightening.
I have one more question that we try to ask every guest, and that's straight up, man. Do you believe in extraterrestrials?
I don't know.
Okay. It's a tough question.
I believe in UAP.
Okay.
I don't know. I would have an easier time believing in nuts and bolts ET than I would in believing that there is a phenomena that is manifested through consciousness or interdimensional or anything like that. But I tell you, the evidence that I'm seeing, anecdotal, obviously, but evidence nonetheless, is more and more pointing away from a larger proliferation of nuts and bolts to a higher concentration of the potential for the phenomenon with a link to consciousness. And for me, being a very non-humanistic virtual society hating hermit for a very long time, this is a hell of a leap.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jeremy. That is amazing. Yeah. And like I said, as eloquent as ever. I love having you on, and I love what you're doing. I love that you are taking control of your experience, and I hope that you continue to be a beacon for those that have witnessed things. Again, whether it be minor. Again, Jeremy, your first sighting lasted a few minutes, maybe a minute and a half with the other guy involved. But if people have seen things like that, I mean, they just need to come out and share, right? And especially in military people. I guess the other thing I meant to ask was, before we sign off here, have you ever given a description of what that guy looked like in terms of trying to find him?
I don't remember.
White guy, crew cut. Yeah, that's not going to.
I don't remember. And
you get like a police sketch artist.
Yeah, he had combat boots and a uniform.
Yeah.
Right.
It's weird too, because the thought had crossed my mind that he may not have actually been an Air Force cop at the time either.
Oh,
with all those agencies that were around there and with all the activity that was around there, it could have been anybody in that uniform.
Yeah.
Well, he could potentially be aware of you, but just like he reacted to seeing that, he just doesn't want to come out and talk about it.
It's potentially possible. Yes, absolutely.
Right. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. Like I said again, and we look forward to hearing more about your adventures in your Sky Hub and Land Rover. So please keep us informed. And where can people find you if they want to sort of follow your adventures? Where can they track Jeremy McGowan?
I am on Twitter. I started a Twitter back in August, and it went from 0 people to, I believe I have almost 820 as of right now.
All right, not too shabby.
No, not too shabby, I guess. But my Twitter handle it's weird, but it's at Jeremy, Jeremy, unidenti1. So it's UNIDENTI and the number 1.
Right. And of course, we will link that in the show notes on Apple and on YouTube as well. We'll make sure people can find you. And they can follow us on Twitter at I Believe in Humans Podcast. They can follow us on Instagram, Facebook. They can check us out on the website, IBelieveInHumansPodcast.com. If you want to grab some merch, feel free to check out the store. But again, we will link everything about Jeremy's story so that you guys can find him and and check out his story on Unidentified if you want to see him in action. Did I get it all, Dustin? Is there anywhere else that
all the good stuff?
Where else can they find
Check us out on YouTube.
We're on all the platforms.
All the platforms there. So keep on asking questions. We're looking for answers.
Absolutely. So thanks again to our guest, Jeremy, and Dustin. Don't forget, it's okay to believe.
You're not alone.
Peace.
See you next time.
It's one small step for man,
Welcome to Earth.
one giant leap for mankind.
What's up, man? It's Lit. UFOs are real.